The Danish author and philosopher and thinker, theologian, poem, romantic, father to the Danes, cultural idea writer Niels Nikolai Frederick Severin Grundtvig was born in Udby, Prestjard, in the south part of Shetland on 18 September 1783. He was the youngest of a group of siblings of seven. Some of them died younger. And his home was a conservative home from a Lutheran conservative family believing in the strong ways of practicing Christianity. And then when he grew up later, he tried to study theology between the age of 1789, 98 to 1803, where he finished high school and then theology studies in Copenhagen. In that period, he got very affected by the ideas of enlightenment that was very much on the move at that time. Also, the movement of the Romanticism that wants to see that deep spirit in nature as the source of the understanding of who we are and the awareness of the human phenomenology. And that affected him also a lot. And in Copenhagen and in those circles, he also met another kind of Christianity that showed the message of forgiveness, love, and a milder way of practicing the religion that he knew, grew up with in his conservative home. His father was a priest and from the Landly area where the traditions had another effect. When he finished, he tried to get work here and there, and then he was occupied by a big rich family on the island of Langeland to work there as a private teacher. And there in 1805 and 1806, his world changed because he fell in love with the lady Constant Lith. She was married and the wife of the people he got to work with there. She was 8 years older, and he kept it secret. He wrote about it later, and he wrote a big poem trying to put nature into the love story and the romantic, and how he got very, very scared inside him because that was against every moral and value that he was raised to believe in. How could he fall for that, and how could he have this shock of that sudden love for this lady that was unbearable for him? And that changed his life also because he started writing to turn his thoughts away and digging into Danish history, mythology, and going all the way back to the Nordic mythology, trying to put it as part of the time he was in, and make the connection between the Danish identity and that Nordic and special mythology that came from there. He also tried to write several preachers and making like notice of himself as an historian as well. He got out of there, and then he moved to Copenhagen again in 1808, where he lived and earned his money in a kind of high school teaching geography and history, and started also really focusing on writing again. But the years that followed made him go back all the way home to his parents because his father needed help running the area as a priest, and he needed his son, who also was a theologian and on the way becoming a priest too. And in that period, he also finished actually and got a good character, but he was also somehow getting himself into trouble by discussing the idea that the church is not really living up to its duty, and the word of God has disappeared from the church. And that's something he really took talking about in his finishing exams, and made big notice of himself later when it was published. And in those years between 10 and 11, he got also a lot of shifting in moods, and got troublesome times with himself in his ideas and doubts, and not knowing really where he is and what he belongs to. And he could really get heavy-minded and really, really in trouble with his bases and thoughts and ideas and shifting moods at that time. But it all stabilized when he went back to his home and worked with his father, and slowly he became more calm and left these thoughts that made a lot of troublesome impact on him. And so he got engaged to a lady called Lise Blischer, and married her later in 1818 because of the economic situation at that time. His father died in 1813, and that also made a change for him, but it also meant that he could move away from that area and his obligation. So as you can understand, he is a man of obligation, a man of great values connected to the Christian thoughts and ideas from a conservative home. The morals meant a lot to him. At the same time, he was adapting philosophy, Enlightenment thoughts, Romanticism, trying to become a poet, writing himself into this life, and also looking into history to understand the time he was in and the identity of the time he was in. So he started slowly becoming more and more known. Also, when he started looking at the story of Beowulf and that's its connection to Denmark, he looked in the history of Saxo and Snorre and made impression by writing on these things in different ways in volumes. And so he got a higher position in 1821 as a priest, and later 1822 in a part of Copenhagen called Christianshavn, Vor Frelses Kirke. And then in 1825 he made this very special discovery, as he says, that also left a lasting impact, but also discussion and polemic in the circles of theologian people who study Christianity or are living with it and believe in it. And that was that the church has to be renewing itself away from the holy book as itself. We cannot rely anymore on the word of the scripture, because it has been really bombarded with criticism at that time, and was yet also to be bombarded even more for not being consistent, and had a lot of contradictions in it, and a lot of troublesome interpretations and many voices. And so in a scientific light, it could not uphold as a scripture to be totally relied on. So what to do? And he found that the church, to survive and get on, it has to connect to the living word in the community of the church, the communion as the place where to go, the altar, and the connection with the living word, the Christ himself, through the living word. And that's why he also focused a lot on writing songs and poems in the spirit of Romanticism, also using nature and the things we can observe out there, giving it a spirit and connecting it to the human spirit and the afterlife as well. But that also gave him a lot of trouble in these years, because he got opposed by some theologians and people with big positions for his ideas, and finally he got censored actually, and later life started opening more up for him, and in the late 20s he got his small circle of followers and people who could listen to him, but then it all broke up in 1837, where he really felt that a heavy load had been put on him, and really got to realize the importance of the freedom of speech, and the idea of that was also gaining strength at that time, that different communities and different church communities should be included and have their freedom to preach their differences without this censorship. That was very broad-minded, to be more broad-minded in his time. In those late 20s, from 1829 to 32, he went several trips to England in those years, and also got in contact with political and social ideas that was on the march at that time, very much out of the Enlightenment years, that also influenced him a lot, and his writings and his way of thinking. And so in the late 30s, like a decade later, he got his good position actually, and even the king, Christian VIII, and the Queen Caroline Amalia was very glad for him. And so in 1839, he became a priest in the very central hospital of Varto, the place that really is still related to him today, and has a center for culture and education in his name, Grundtvig's Studier, Grundtvig's Forum, and it's called Varto in the inner part of Copenhagen, that gets a lot of visitors as well. And so he got there, and he got very central in that time, and so starting also looking into politics, education and pedagogy, and made this idea of the public high schools and the public folk schools, and started focusing on writing psalms and poems, both for the church singing but also for life. And he held a lot of speeches. Some of them were on Greek and Nordic mythology, and also about some special stories from that time. And he was also known especially for man's memory lessons that he held. He could speak in length for several hours. And so in the mid-40s to the late 40s, he became a central figure in the public, and people were listening to him, and he had a lot of followers, and so he was also part of that National Assembly in 1848-49 that had to work on the constitution, because the king gave all these admissions to people to have representatives. So the political structure was changing around him, as well as the culture that was forming Denmark in a new way that was unprecedented for many hundred years. And he had a lot of he had a lot of impact, but not a lot of his ideas got through, because the liberal and what can I say, progressive movement of that time had the higher ground and the strongest voice. But at the same time, he could relate and changed his mind slowly about democracy, and could see that this Danish nationalism needed a historic aspect and also a religious one, so it doesn't lose its roots and its self-understanding. And he married several times. He lost first his wife, and then he married a lady 30 years younger than him called Maria Toft. And then in 1855, he married with also very young lady, Asta Reeds, and they got a daughter. And so he has several sons and daughters as well from his marriages. And so it was a big life to keep track on, and a lot of writings and really many books. And he had a big impact. He died as 83 years old in 1867. In 1872. And it's September 2nd, so almost close to his birthday, September 8th. It's difficult to give a short insight in his life without really needing to stop up by many of his sides. And that's what I'm going to try to do here. And so he had a big impact at his time, as I told in a former video, global impact and impact on Denmark and its development as well. And so I've used this book of Anders Holm, a book I've translated into Danish, to talk about this Grundtvig, because the book really inspired me as well and let me understand him in a way just beneath the surface, but not so deep that you get lost in that jungle of discussions and words and theologian troubles that maybe can make the ordinary people like me and you get lost and lose the interest. But the book is still deep enough to give you that sense of his personality, his poems, his challenges, his way of life. And it's a good book in 9 chapters. The first one talking about him as a romantic, the second one of him as a mythologist, a third one as a priest, the fourth one as an historian, public enlightenment person, enlightening the public in other way, the poem writer, the politician, the Danish identity, and his work in the world, in Denmark, and the world as well. Well, that's what I will go on talking about. Shortly to say, he was a really compact figure and very complex figure also to figure out. But if you understand that human life is a development, and you understand that thinkers and philosophers, theologians with big minds and great hearts, they are really trying to both find the truth, hold on to the traditions they believe are true, but also looking to these new tidings that are around them. And basically, he had a mission of saving his country and his faith. This is what I see in him. He wants to save the monotheism in Christianity as and the faith of the living faith between people that was gonna get lost in these mass movement times where people just gonna surround themselves by very shallow ideas, and many people were left on the grounds, not having education, not having any practical knowledge. And at that time, the public schools weren't for everyone, and the schools weren't afforded by everyone. So many people did not have the basic enlightenment in their life. And this is what he also wanted to bring them, most likely inspired by the time of the Enlightenment and the story of his travels to England, where he also met with some people from society over there that made an impact on him. Anyhow, he also has a development in his own life that's very worthy. And he had this struggle with combining a faith with times that's going away from the faith. And that also is very inspiring. How do you do that? How do you avoid getting stuck in your ideas that you see is true, while they are an interpretation of the faith, while people and life is moving in a direction without you compromising your ground, but also finding a solution or a good bridge to bring yourself and your people and your religion and your faith over. This is how I see what he's doing. He's building a bridge from the traditions, the values of the Christian life. And for me, I'm looking at it as monotheism. This is what's concerning me. But for a Christian person, it would be more concerning that, well, what do I do with this faith of mine? And in a time where it's getting lost, the Bible is bombarded. People are going after political ideologies that's taking them in different ways. We have this Marxism from the East, and there is this liberal trend in the West. And so things are like changing a lot around him and in society, slowly and sometimes quickly. And he's facing these tidings. And so he want to build a bridge to take his faith and his understanding over to the new world with him. And that succeeded a lot, and also made an imprint on the Danish mentality as a development process, as people can develop like these thinkers can. And it also made a lasting impact that he, on some points, changed his mind by saying, well, human first and then Christian. And that has a double meaning, of course. It's not only saying the humans first and Christian then, as if you only follow humanism. And it's not only in the meaning of missionary, but it's also like giving the value for the human life and idea in itself and respecting it, tolerating it. That was a big trouble also in his time, where there was these struggles. And by his really big engagement in writing and thinking, he also renewed the Danish language and identity and self-understanding. And he put the people on a level that they could really rise above the smallness they got into. They had lost a lot of the southern areas, and nations around them. Norway had already annexed itself in 1817 and got its independence, and Sweden was turning against Denmark, and we had trouble with the English, and there was a lot of things that was shrinking in the Danish Empire. And so we had the revolution later in France, and the European nations going against the kings and the old systems, including the religious systems that followed the king's ways of ruling. And so people were revolting and wanting new tides and new ways of life and new political ideas. And how do you build a bridge so you can get the faith with you and keep it in the heart of people? This is really big, what he achieved there, knowingly or unknowingly, even though he also had his critics and was criticized for several things that's also important to take along in this trip. But so he managed to do all that and managed to get several kids and had 3 wives, and not at the same time, but after each other. One died, and so he outlived people and almost outlived the whole century. But we have what we have, and this is why I want to talk about this, because it's inspiring as a life story and also as ideas, and ideas can give renewal in societies and life. We never know who will be the next great figure or personality or spirit that will build this bridge in a new way between the original, the traditional, the deep spirit, the eternal, if I can say so, with what's going on in the times that we are in. And this is what you feel. He's giving you a path to the eternal, of course, through the Christian faith and psalms and songs. So for me as a Muslim, I had also to relate to this, but I'm also part of the Danish culture, so I can understand that if I do not look at it from like a strict Muslim Christian perspective of what he's saying and why, but I look at it as, okay, this is his deep belief in the one God, and he want to bring it on. How do he do that? What is he doing? What kind of effort has he been putting into that, and how did it succeed around him? And so that's beautiful. Also building up the self-understanding of the Danes and giving them that confidence of being a small but strong nation, and being a nation that has a lot of culture and a lot of uniqueness in them they could use for good purposes. And that has shaped the Danish identity and thoughts up until now. This is what I'm going to talk about also in the next small talks.